Hello, everyone. You are at the right place, whether you're joining us Facebook Live or you're actually joining through Zoom. This is From the Ground Up. Marketing is everything. We are joined by our guest speakers from Deploy Marketing. We are going to wait a couple more minutes. We'll go ahead and get started probably a minute after our allotted time, which is 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. East.
So to give you just some quick background on us, we're a nationwide dental specific marketing company, as they suggested. We're soup to nuts, one-stop shopping. We have clients all over the United States and Canada, and our full service regarding all forms of digital marketing. And so the last thing I would say is a very high retention rate because of the way we approach marketing. You'll hear more about that during this webinar. So with that, we have both co-owners and also the head of our dental specific content departments, and we'll all chime in to help answer questions and provide something valuable so you can hit the ground running come Monday. Kyle?
Hey, thanks, Steve. So I'll just go quickly over today's agenda. We're going to talk about dental website must-haves, things that you definitely should have on your website. Search engine optimization. We're going to give you kind of a cautionary tale with some forward-looking thoughts as well. We are going to discuss whether or not the market size matters, how big or how small the market you're in, how it relates to the different marketing endeavors that you are going to undertake. We're going to explain tracking of those marketing expenditures, how to track them. We're going to explain how to craft your practice and personal image, as well as understand and know your niche, as well as provide a marketing journey playbook that will cover from our recommended process from beginning through kind of maturation for your marketing campaigns as well. So jumping in for dental website must-haves, this is going to be a list of things that every website should have. We're going to provide you with a take-home or a takeaway sheet with everything listed on here after the webinar as well. But every single practice website should have a clearly visible practice name, address, phone number. That's how the search engines figure out one business from another. Chains will have different addresses, different phone numbers in the same name, but they still all have an address, a name, and a phone number. You're going to want to have the dentist biography or biographies on the site as well, because the patients are looking to establish a relationship with the practice, and they're going to want to know a little bit about the practitioner that they're coming to see, as well as a nice professional photograph, which we'll actually touch on a little bit later in the webinar. You're going to want some team photos, as well as abridged or shortened team biographies to let the prospective patients understand and know who else works in the office, the hygienists who are in contact with a lot of the patients regularly. It's important to have that present on the website as well. You're going to want to have an office tour, and we're going to provide takeaway after the webinar as well related to recommended office tour photos. There's maybe 18 to 20 recommended types of photographs to have for your office tour. Patients want to see where they're going to come for their dental work. So having that office tour is going to put their mind at ease a little bit so they can kind of see your storefront and things like that prior to coming in. You're going to want a smile gallery. This is where you establish proof points, show your work, break that down by different niche, whether it's porcelain veneers, full mouth restorations and such, or orthodontics. But having a smile gallery builds proof points for your prospective patients that can actually see the work that you're saying on the website that you do. You're going to want information about your billing, accepted billing methods, different credit cards, check, things like that, as well as insurance logos and in-network or out-of-network providers. You'll also want to have information related to the financing options if the practice offers that. Making treatment affordable is really important, especially nowadays, and those 3 items check the box off and at least let the patients understand how you bill and what types of insurance or financing options are accepted. If the practice has a membership plan, it's very important to have that clearly outlined on the website. These are gaining in popularity. 10 years ago, you never saw membership plans. And in the last few years, it seems like every other dental office has some sort of in-house or third-party membership plan that they sell to their patient base or new patients as well. You're going to want to have new patient forms, whether that's the traditional PDFs or their online fillables. That's really important because the patients expect that, as well as having that completed prior to the patients coming in for their visit. Their first visit is really important from a time efficiency standpoint. You're going to want additional proof points on top of Smile Gallery, which would include reviews or testimonials. These could be taken off of Google, off of Yelp, Facebook. You could even scan in handwritten testimonials. We've seen that done a couple times in the past as well. That just allows patients to understand and be presented with other patients who have had positive experiences. You're going to want an appointment request form, whether it's a simple name, address, phone number field, or one that integrates into a third party, or one that's native to your dental software. You want to give the patient the ability to at least request an appointment, and that could go as far as allowing them to physically book the appointments through some of the third party options out there. You want lots of service content. The search engines cannot see, they can only read. And by having lots of service content, you're establishing yourself as an authority in the industry. I would say you shouldn't be expected to rank for keywords that you don't have at least a page of content for. That's a general rule of thumb. And last but not least, you obviously want your website to be mobile friendly. It's pretty rare nowadays that you'll find sites that are being created right now that are not mobile friendly, but don't take that for granted. Double or triple check that your website is mobile friendly, or the one that you're having built is mobile friendly.
So Kyle, I've got a question for you.
Yes.
As you know, I've worked with startups, and this is a question I've always been asked. When should they include videos on their website?
That's actually a good question. Our philosophy on videography is it's a love-hate. So if it's quality videos, you can put them front and center. It could be a video of the practice, a drone video leading up to the front door, and then it goes into different shots inside the office. I would say if they're procedure-related videos, depending on the production quality, you may or may not include them on the site, but it still would be important to produce some video content because patients will see that in the search results. You'll see videos in the search result for YouTube, Vimeo, and the different platforms. And I would say that it's probably would be known as more of an advanced component of the dental website would be videography. If you're going to have that done, have it done at the time you have your office tour photos taken. Sometimes you can get a 2-in-1 company that does photos and video as well as the editing and production. But if you're going to do that, I would give you a caveat just saying, depending on the quality of the video would depend on whether or not you'd want it prominent on the website or maybe just on one of the interior pages of the website.
I would add to that it's not a must-have, but it's can very often be a cherry on top to
Great
improve
point.
the overall feel.
And it's something that can also set you apart too, just because I would say maybe 10% or less of the websites we see have live action video on them. So 10% of the dental websites we see. So it's an exception to the rule. You don't see it often, but if it's done well, it can definitely have an impact. I'm going to tell you a cautionary tale about search engine optimization. I'm sure everyone on this call has heard of SEO. They may not have any clue what it is, but just to give you a brief understanding, the textbook definition of it is the process of improving quality and quantity of website traffic from search engines. SEO is targeting unpaid traffic rather than direct traffic like Google ads or Facebook ads. The benefit of SEO is that the clicks you're getting to your website, you're not actually paying for each click. So the end result of a well-run SEO campaign is you should be getting patients who weren't coming before through your website from those search endeavors without having to pay for every interaction or click. Historically, if you asked 10 people what SEO is, you would hear close to 10 different interpretations of it. And that's why the black box analogy is very relevant. It's kind of like, what is happening? Like, I bought SEO, what is actually taking place? So the industry is, whereas there are other areas of dentistry that are not like this, dental marketing not like this. SEO is kind of like a black box. You don't know exactly who you're going to get, and Occasionally you run into bad actors who give the industry and that form of marketing a bad name. I'm going to give you some things to look out for. We broke them down into red and yellow flags. Red flags are kind of avoid, or yellow flags are trust it, but verify. Look into it further, ask for references and testimonials. So to start off the red flags, ownership of accounts. If you are not given complete ownership of your accounts, that is a definite red flag. The practice, the dentist, the owner of that marketing campaign should own the accounts that are being optimized. Otherwise, they could be held as almost like a ransom situation if you were to try to leave that company. You want to have clearly defined goals, since SEO covers a wide swatch, as well as working with a third-party company, meaning the search engines. You want to define your goals before starting, whether it's increase in new traffic, X number of new patients. Those should be clearly outlined up front. Using black hat techniques, that refers to kind of the old cowboy analogy where the good guys wore white hats and the bad guys wore black hats. And that term has stuck in the SEO industry, where black hat techniques would be things like buying backlinks or bulk submissions. There's really no shortcuts or get rich quick scheme when it comes to SEO. It's time and effort produces the results. So when companies or agencies use these shortcut techniques, you really don't have control over what websites these links are coming from, and you can really get into trouble. And it's very hard to get links off of a website that were bulk submitted. So once they're there, they're there. You want to avoid people who are guaranteeing rankings or traffic because they're dealing with a third party. They don't control that third party. They're at the mercy of it. So be careful of any guarantees related to how you rank or the traffic you're going to receive. And be careful of free trials, because SEO is very resource intensive and a lot of the work is front loaded. So if somebody's offering you a free trial, they're probably cutting corners because of the time and the amount of content manipulation and directory citations. Free trials would be something to probably steer clear of. When you talk about yellow flags, these are on the fence where I would investigate further, but it doesn't mean necessarily you're dealing with a bad actor by any means. But things like data overshare, the companies that send you those 70-page reports each month, generally they're trying to hide the main key performance indicators. You should be able to analyze your SEO campaign with just a handful of different metrics. If you start diving into individual keyword rankings, you might be getting too granular. Look at actual production rather than how you're ranking, because that's subjective to how many people are searching for that keyword. Lack of transparency. The SEO company should be willing to tell you everything they're doing. There's no secret sauce. If you go look up SEO best practices, they should be following those best practices, and lack of transparency should be something to be concerned about. Monthly recurring charges. SEO is a resource intensive marketing endeavor, but be cautious of the affordable monthly costs. When you engage with what you would call kind of nationwide top tier SEO firms, those contracts are pretty expensive, and they also have exceptionally well detailed goals set out at the beginning. So you're able to see benchmarks and things being hit, but be cautious if it seems too good to be true for what you're being told is the takeaway from that. The cancellation process, this should be straightforward. Like, you don't want to get into a situation where you're wanting to cancel and then they are holding your, for instance, ownership of accounts over your head. That should be something that's clearly defined. It's very rare to see short-term contracts with SEO firms, since SEO takes a long time to gain the rankings needed in order to fulfill that marketing endeavor. And one of my favorites is the "we know someone at Google," and that might absolutely be true, but they have zero impact on how you're going to end up ranking. And in fact, they most likely are not even working in the algorithm department of their search engineering team. So I know lots of people at Google, not one of them is going to be able to help me rank better from an SEO standpoint. So that's something to kind of factor in too. If people are name dropping and things like that, it would be definitely a yellow flag. And finally, if they don't have case studies or references, they should be willing to provide examples of websites that they've achieved high rankings with, as well as case studies or some client references where they can the prospective client can call someone who had a good experience with that marketing endeavor. And as I said before, you want to trust but verify. So I'm not saying SEO is not a good marketing plan. I'm just saying trust it but verify the facts before you get involved with somebody you may regret. When you're reviewing your SEO performance, it should be something that company's willing to show you the individual line items, like in a Google Analytics account, whether it's in a custom dashboard. They should be willing to have that conversation with you and walk you through how to interpret those reports. And it should not be a stressful time. Like it should be looking at key performance indicators and drilling down into monthly performance, comparing it to the last month, maybe the year prior's production versus this year's or this month's. Moving into the market size, we get asked this question a lot. We have clients in large and small markets, and the question is like, does it really make much of a difference? And if you see a heat map at nighttime of the United States, you'll see different population centers. Those would be areas with high population densities. The areas that are not illuminated would be more rural areas. When you look at this market, this is Times Square. It's a vertical. There's stacking people on people in this market, 8 million people in the city. There's a lot of prospective patients here. There's also a lot of competition. Whereas you see a market like Burlington, Vermont, that market is going to be a much smaller market. They're not going to have the population density of some of the large ones. And the whole point of this is comparing the two. When you compare a small to a large market, they're almost inverses of each other, but that is not a negative thing. So small markets generally will have a low population. The large will have a high one. Low population density versus a much more high population density in the large market. In smaller markets, you usually have a reduced marketing cost compared to the large market because there's fewer competitors, making your cost to achieve certain clicks and advertisements lower than somebody, say, in Manhattan. Patients will drive further in rural markets than they will in a high population density market. Someone in Manhattan may only go a few blocks or maybe a half mile or a mile, whereas someone in a rural setting or a more rural setting generally can drive 15 miles and even more than that, depending on the specific market. You'll have lower competition in the small market compared to the big one. So that's an advantage. And lastly, it's marketing on the internet is a product of how many people are searching. There are markets that are too small where there's just not a lot of searches that happen. And in a large market, you usually have an overabundance of searches because people are being stacked on top of each other. The density is a lot higher. And
Kyle, we actually do have a question from Dr. M, and they're saying, which market would you open a practice in if you had to choose?
It's a great question. I personally would actually choose a neither. I would choose a small, mid-sized market outside of a large one. The reason behind that is you're able to achieve search ranking or SEO in your specific city, but you can market and pull patients from the higher population areas into the suburbs. So there's no real right answer because you'll have very profitable, well-oiled dental practices in both size markets. Historically, the ones sitting outside of high population density areas have a tendency to have very low acquisition costs for their marketing. So something that may cost $400 in Manhattan might cost $67 in a rural market. It might also be something that you're able to pull from the population into the rural setting. A lot of people who live in the rural setting may work in a large market. So even though they are working their day in a big market, they may come home to the smaller market, not have an issue with transportation. But I would say, to answer that, a mid-sized market with close proximity to a very high densely populated area.
That's a great answer. And what I would add to that is just that we work with clients, like I said, all over North America and just about every type of market. And so there's best practices in all these markets. And a lot of the content you'll hear today will apply to numerous markets.
No, thank you guys for those responses. And Dr. M, I hope that answers the question. Please let us know if you have additional questions on top of that.
Perfect, thank you. Jumping over to tracking your marketing expenditure. This is a an interesting topic because there's not a lot of dental practices that really know their marketing expenditures, where it's going, what's the return. And for the practices that are not marketing, I'm not saying that their marketing endeavors are not working, but if they aren't, you're definitely burning cash without knowing the results, the return on investment, things like that from your campaign. And we're going to tell you kind of how and what to evaluate from a very high point looking down on the campaigns. I had mentioned prior KPIs. That's a key performance indicator for a dental office and an online marketing campaign. There's really 3 of them: a phone call, a email or form submission, as well as a web chat lead. Those are the 3 ways a new patient or even a current patient is going to come and contact the practice for the first time. You're going to want to record all your phone calls through your marketing endeavor. I'm not saying to record phone calls from your website. Those should be calling your direct practice line, but on your marketing, your direct performance marketing, it's very important to record the calls so you know that the phones are being answered correctly. If you ever need to pull a call up, you can. You can also determine and track down individual patient line items where you can then compare to production. You want to get a dedicated tracking number. Our recommendation is to use a tracking number with your area code on it. If you are a multi-area code practice with multiple offices, toll-free is usually the route to go there. Track and monitor web chat leads. I would almost guarantee that the vast majority of practices who use some sort of web chat component, they don't know exactly how many new patients they got from that endeavor. But having the web chat on a website does something interesting. It reduces the number of phone calls you get because a traditional phone call is coming through a web chat now. So it should take as much importance tracking the other forms of conversions like web chats and form submissions as it does on the phone call side. You want to use a landing page to isolate visitors. This is what Fortune 500 and 100 companies use. Instead of sending that paid traffic to your homepage, send it to a page specific to that offer, one that someone cannot find if they go to your website. They should only be able to get to the landing page if you know the link or click the ad. By doing that, you create a closed system where you know the cost to generate and you know the results from it. There's no room for misinterpretation. Like, you know what goes in and what comes out of that closed system. It's very hard to make that same level of interpretation off a website because they're calling your practice directly. Usually those phone numbers are not tracked. You, in order to check a production manually, you would take the list of callers in the month, the list of web chats, run their name through your practice management software, see if they came in. If they came in, what was spent. You could then formulate different marketing metrics like ROAS, which is return on ad spend, how much your ads cost as a product of what the return was. It shows marketing efficiency. Return on investment includes factoring in the practice's overhead and other components like that. So ROAS is the most raw way of interpreting a marketing campaign success. ROI is a little more intricate of a formula because it factors in a couple additional components. Reviewing your marketing is not a stressful occurrence. You should be able to do it at your leisure. The company you're working with should be willing to meet with you, review the number sets, walk you through how to read and interpret it. You then can make the decisions on your end whether or not the marketing is working. At least you have all the facts to make that choice. This is one of my favorite sections of the whole presentation. It's regarding crafting your personal and professional image. So how to position yourself as well as your practice and what to avoid. Some things are overlooked, some seem like common sense. A famous quote, "You'll never get a second chance to make a first impression." That's true whether they come to your website, they come to your practice, they meet you, shake your hand, and begin a conversation. Each one of those items creates a first impression of some kind or another. In this case, this is an example of a good and a bad headshot. The image on the left is cut off. The person is wearing an older shirt that might look a little weathered. They maybe have not shaven. They're not looking into the camera. There's a lot wrong with that. On the right image, you'll see that the opposite of that is done. The whole headshot is in the frame. They're looking directly in the camera. They're dressed in a professional outfit, and the background is also kind of blurred behind them. Not saying that's required. Practices, you can take your headshot against a solid color out in nature, but you don't want someone else like checking out at a cashier behind you in your headshot or something like that. Moving on from how you want to be perceived to your office. If you have an office that is less than ideal, understand that the patients cast judgment on that. If you see these side by side and every factor is the same except these two photos, it's obvious which route the patient would be going to. So things like that create that first impression, including photos of you, your office tour, and then finally your storefront. This is something a lot of that you may or may not have control of, but when somebody's approaching these doors for the first time, both of them will create a different response in that patient's mind. On the left side, they might be a little concerned. On the right side, it's very warm and inviting. The practice's brand is clear front and center. Every time someone drives by this office, they know what dental office that is. On the left, it's just a generic dentist sign. There's no name, not even a professional name associated with it. So this is just a quick overview of how you want to brand yourself and be perceived. We're going to provide a checklist. I think I had mentioned earlier, a takeaway checklist that you can provide a photographer
Right.
come into your office.
Yeah. So Kyle, a question did come through regarding that. Dr. Z is asking, how much does it cost to bring in a professional photographer?
Great question. I would qualify that by saying photographer without video will depend on obviously the size of the practice, but it less than $1,000. It generally in the range of a couple hundred, maybe 500 or 600, because it doesn't take them a long time to do that. We provide you, and you'll have this as a takeaway, a list you can literally hand to your photographer that tells them what photos to take for marketing purposes as well as for your own record. We get photographs all the time that are missing pieces. Like we get great office tour inside, but the photographer omitted exterior shots, omitted the entrance and signage. So I would say once you add video into the equation and editing that video, the cost is going to skyrocket. But for a photographer, I would say maybe $1,000 as the price ceiling on doing something like that.
Well, thanks for that, Kyle, and be on the lookout for that checklist, Dr. Z.
Awesome. So this is going to cover the area. Steve is going to take care of this section related to knowing your niche.
Yeah, thank you, Kyle. Great information. So let's take this in a different area. So if any of you are on the call that have been on the planet as long as myself and probably a few others, you might have heard of the name Zig Ziglar. He was one of the original motivational speakers, and he had a great question that he posed to his audiences. Are you a wandering generality or a meaningful specific? Are you a wandering generality or a meaningful specific? In other words, how do you stand out from the crowd? Many of us in the last month watched the Olympics and saw international athletes around the globe compete at the highest level, not only in a sport, but also in an area within that sport. And dentistry is no different. So how do you clinically, professionally, in your practice vision, stand out from the pack? In other words, what type of practice are you? And there's 3 specific areas that you need to look at when considering who specifically you're marketing to. Number 1, identify 1 or more areas that make your practice unique. If you're an MBA student at any postgraduate school in the United States, you're going to learn about 2 things: distinctive competencies, what you can do at a higher level, and competitive advantages. Maybe it's pricing, maybe it's your philosophy and service approach. Maybe it's just the quality and caliber of your technology or facility and how you execute. So what are the areas that make you unique? Number 2, craft a brand identity and logo that reflects your community, your offering, and your values. In other words, what can you do within your practice that effectively markets to, attracts, retains, and then even earns referrals that honor your stakeholders? Everyone's heard of a stockholder. What's a stakeholder? A stakeholder is anyone that actually has an investment and a preferred outcome for the success of your practice. And that's obviously your great team, your current team and future team. It means your local vendor partners. It means your community within the dental field, you know, study clubs, specialists, other general dentists, your you know, association in town, along with your existing patients and the new patients. So crafting a brand identity and logo that helps today as well as the future. And number three, it's creating flagship offers, deals, or promotions around your brand. So specifically, who are you going to attract? Who are you looking to focus on? Let's take a look at a few together. It might be parents of young children, teenagers. Pediatric dentistry is on the rise in many areas of the country. How about emergency dentistry? Patients in pain or discomfort. We kept a lot of practices going during the pandemic just by creating emergency dentistry ads. And as you can imagine, when economies dip, maybe people are proposed treatment but don't move forward, and that's within your own practice. And then there are quite others. Only 50% of the available patients throughout the country regularly see the dentist. One of two. That means there's a lot of people walking around like this gentleman has a great smile, but how about those that have one or more missing teeth? You might be looking to market dentures or even implants. In addition, there's a number of patients that may be new to your community, new to your area, or might be in a practice that recently transitioned to a new dentist and now they're open to your practice. In addition, a wider, brighter smile. How about those that are looking to straighten or look at orthodontics? Also aesthetics, cosmetic, elective, even full mouth dentistry, and even further specialties like obstructive sleep apnea. And finally, you know, it's a unique time and place in 2021. And I'm sure everyone with a smile is noticing in their morning huddles throughout their day, at the end of the day, when you exhale after a long one, that people are a little bit different in 2021. They're a little bit fractured. They're not 100%, maybe even a little bit more dental phobic with a little more anxiety. So being able to cater to these patients and begin with the end in mind. And so as I'm going to the next section and introducing Clay Reason, I'll leave you with that thought. If you've ever read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey is a phenomenal author. And habit number 2 is one of my favorites. Begin with the end in mind. Think about at your funeral what you want said about you, and then just work your way backwards to be that person. Same thing's true clinically, same thing's true on the practice management and the business side of dentistry. Think about what your practice should be and evolve to at the time that you retire and successfully transition it into capable hands. And then work your way backwards. Do it on the continuing education side, certainly on the digital marketing side, as well as with your team and your business. And with that, I'd like to introduce Clay Reason. Again, he leads all our dental content and has for many years. And he's going to help you learn a little bit more about your marketing journey. Clay?
And if
Thanks,
you guys don't
Steve.
mind if I jump in real quick, I
Oh,
actually
please.
have a
Yeah.
question for you, Steve.
Absolutely.
I mean, right now we're seeing a lot of multi-specialties. People are wanting to add in specialties, whatever that may be. So how would you suggest they target one, or how do they add a niche to their dental practice? How would they market something like that?
Fantastic question. Thanks, Nicole. Not only for the person that posed that question, but the rest of the group. Everything is an evolution. It's true personally. It's certainly true professionally. With a smile, we work with a lot of dentists that are starting a practice from scratch right out of school. And they'll confide, the ones, because we get close, they become friends over time. And they'll say, you know, Steve, it used to take me 45 minutes just to place a rubber dam. And now I'm doing cosmetic care or quadrant dentistry to full mouth dentistry. And so it's exciting, that evolution. What's super important is that you communicate with great transparency and clarity to your marketing firm as you continue to evolve. If you're doing implant dentistry and you've added a 3D cone beam, super important to convey that. So that can be actually added to all of your platforms. Clay writes exceptional blogs that are seen by Google and picked up. So when your patients, your prospective patients in your area are Googling implant dentistries or missing tooth or anything else, the content on your website, on your blogs, on your Google Ads landing pages need to be able to track those specific people seeking that. So sitting down and figuring out which ones are your immediate focus and long-term focus will help you, even if it's numerous areas, correctly convey that to your existing and future patients.
And Steve, I would just add one thing to that. It's going to be harder to establish yourself in certain niches if you are branded incorrectly. So if you have like a titanium implant screw in your logo, it's going to be tricky to move into family dentistry. So we would generally say, or at least what we come across, is the multi-specialty practices are not named anything in a niche. They're called, city name family dentistry or city name dental care. So you'll see a more generic name and genericized brand for a multi-specialty, where when you see like an implant and implant practice, usually their logo, even the name of the practice might be themed for a niche. So I would say to keep it on the generic side when you come up with a name, and that allows you to add targeted areas in that don't seem out of the mix.
That's a fantastic point. What I'll finish up before we hand it over to Clay is when you're talking about beginning and the end of mind, this also is true with scaling. We help a ton of practice scale. So when they first come to us, we slow down. It's about them and not us. And we ask great questions. This is the same thing you should be doing in the treatment rooms with your patient base. What are they looking for long-term? And so what you want to do is develop marketing systems along with technology and facility systems, practice management systems that allow you to scale to a higher level and volume. Don't create a system that's only going to support a $500,000 practice if you're looking to scale to 1 or 2 million. And so the same thing is true on the marketing side. So engaging with those right questions with your marketing firm is a great way to start. Anyone else want to add to that?
No, I appreciate you guys answering that question. And so Clay, the floor is yours now.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I'm going to be covering the marketing journey playbook, as we call it. And it might sound complicated, but it's really just a brief outline on what order you should be creating or collecting the.
Oops.
I think we lost. There's no.
Yeah, and I could just chime in real quick. The order they would go in is very important because you don't want to put the cart in front of the horse. In this area specifically, you establish a logo and brand initially because your website is going to be built off of the look, the color, the feel, the color palette of your logo and branding. Before you build your website, you'd want to get your signage and stationery dialed out because
Can you hear me now? I can jump back in. Sorry about
that.
Sure.
Yeah. Kyle touched on the logo. I was going to say, try to choose a logo and brand that speak to your niche, the things that Steve talked about. It's a little tricky because it's different for every practice, but it's something that, you want to get right. So take the time to make sure that it reflects your values and your offerings. On the signage and stationery, once you have your logos, you'll obviously want to incorporate your logo onto your print collateral and your office stationery. But very importantly, you want to make sure you use it on your sign on the front of your building. Like Kyle was showing those pictures that we had of the good sign and the bad sign. You don't just want to have generic dentist on the front of your building. You want to let people know that you're here to stay, and it's not just.
And yeah, it's not just a practice that might disappear down the road. You're going to want to parlay that signage into a nice office tour and headshots. By doing
Probably
that,
worth it.
Oh, go ahead, Clay.
Oh, I was just saying,
you cut out for a second there.
Yeah, sorry about that. For your office tour, it's probably worth it to get that professional photographer, since this is something you're really going to be using again and again for different assets that we're about to talk about. Next is your website. A properly developed website with lots of content. That includes all those must-haves that Kyle mentioned earlier. The idea is that your website isn't just a brochure for patients to look up your contact info, but you want to make it into a tool that's useful and take some of the work off of your front office. You want to be able to direct people to your patient forms or your appointment request form And it's important to remember, we always talk about the website, and your whole online presence is like a wheel on a bicycle, where your website is the hub, and then all the other things are the spokes on the wheel. They all lead back to your website. So you want to make sure that that is done correct and to your liking. Finally, or the next one is, right after you do your website, probably the very next thing you want is to verify and optimize your Google My Business listing. For those that don't know, are the map results that very often appear in Google search results for local services or products, like San Francisco dentist or Dallas dentist, or even dental related services like porcelain veneers in Charleston or dental implants in St. Louis. These are one of the biggest sources of traffic for your website, because they appear so prominently in the search results with a map, that tracks their attention. And that's also where your Google reviews are left from patients. So that's really an important asset to claim and verify. You might not even realize that you have a profile, but Google automatically creates them by scanning business directories. So you want to find your listing on there and claim it and verify it, and make sure that all your business info is correct, so that your brand and your message is consistent where patients will find you. On social media, you'll see that we say establish a comfortable social media presence. What that means is only pick and use the social media that your team will actually use and update. There's no reason to set up a bunch of accounts that are just forgotten about and lie dormant. Facebook should probably be a given, since it's one of the biggest ones that people use. But other than that, you may want to take a poll of your team members to see what they use personally, and that will, they'll already be familiar with the platform, so they'll be much more likely to actually use it. One more thing about social media, it's not just about promoting your practice. You want to engage by giving them fun content and just an insight into your office culture. For example, one practice of ours does a Halloween costume contest and a pumpkin decorating contest every year at Halloween. So, and they always get a lot of likes and views on that post. So it's not just about promoting your practice and your offers, but just being authentic, and you'll end up generating patients more organically.
Right. And Clay, just to jump in on that one. Also, one of the things to keep in mind is on social networks, it's called a social network. So the people who are liked your page are probably people who already know about you. Provide content for your audience. If they already know about you and they already are a patient, engage with them on photos of team birthdays and trips to the ADA annual session, or like Clay had said, different contests and things to potentially engage people on things unrelated to dentistry, but through your dental profile on that network.
Yeah. And the next point, incorporate special offers, deals, or promotions. Steve touched on this a bit. And it's really about establishing some sort of offering that you're known for in your community. And whether or not that's related to your specific niche, just something that's a good deal that beats your competitors' pricing, that you can become known for in the community, like cheaper implants or Invisalign, even a teeth whitening promo, or even just a $99 exam x-ray cleaning. Having that consistent offering that people see, they'll recognize that's a good deal, and it will stick in their mind when they see it, time and again. And then when they're ready to make that decision, you'll be front and center in their mind. The next is directory listing management. What that means is all of the other review sites and local directories that have profiles of your practice, like Yellow Pages or Yelp, and as well as even things like GPS devices like Garmin or Apple Maps. They have your profiles live on those devices in their own isolated directories. So make sure that your business info is correct and complete across all those platforms, and that you're using your new logo and your branding across all of these platforms. So you're really controlling the message wherever patients may find you.
Hey, Clay, I've got a question
Yes.
for you that's just come in. They're asking, would you recommend print mailers and where would they fit into this mix?
That's a good question. Print mailers, it really would depend on what type of mailer it is, and whether you're trying to attract new patients or if it's or if you're trying to, send appointment reminders or reactivation to current patients. If it's a new patients, then I would hold off till you have all of your branding and your online assets in line, because you don't want to be sending people, because they're going to be doing research on you once they see your offer. So you want to make sure that you've got your reputation management online. You got your Google My Business. You want all that to have good results, so they only find good things about you before you promote yourself to new patients. But if it's appointment reminders and reactivation, then you could do that uh, early on in this process, as soon as you have uh, the design and layout of it, and maybe the new branding and stuff for sure. But definitely, if it's a targeting new patients, blanketing the entire neighborhood, that can be very costly. So it's not worth doing that until you have all of your other assets in line.
And then Clay, just to add one thing to answer that question is say if you're a brand new start practice, you don't have the reactivations that you'd be sending to. So if your strategy was print mailers for new patients, you're in essence placing a costly postcard in front of somebody you hope needs what you're selling. Generally speaking, the new patients are going to go online. They're going to type dentist near me, dentist in my city. The acquisition cost for internet advertising can generate, more often than not, can generate those leads more effectively and efficiently than a print mailer, as well as being able to track it. Most of the practices that we've come across that are using print mailers are not even using tracking numbers on them. So they really have no clue unless the offer is specific to that mailer. There is no way to measure if it's working or not.
Great info. Thank you.
And it looks like
And-
someone does actually have their hand up, so I'm gonna allow them to talk and ask their questions.
Sure.
Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, he's still on mute.
We'll ask him to unmute.
Can you unmute, Jim?
All right, maybe he did not mean to raise his hand, so we can continue on.
Hey, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to raise my hand. I don't know what I'm doing over here.
No problem. And Clay,
So
you want
Clay-
to touch on the reputation component?
Yeah, I think I already covered that, but reputation management is just directing patients to leave reviews and asking them to leave reviews on, most of them you're going to want to target to your Google My Business listing, because that's the most visible and most prominent in the search results. But reputation management is about asking them to leave a review, because you want to bring up that star rating across whatever platform they find you on and control the message.
And then one thing to add to that, Clay, is that there's really two philosophies for reputation management: proactive and reactive. Proactive is you do that from day one. You get a whole bunch of positive sentiment and reviews. And then when and if a negative review occurs, it doesn't swing the average anyway. And then a reactive approach is all of a sudden you look for the first time at your Google My Business and your rating's like a 2.7. And you're like, oh, this is something I need. So that person's always that practice is always at a disadvantage because they're trying to play catch up. The proactive practice is in a position that 1, 2, 3 bad reviews, it's not going to change really anything.
Yeah, and you want to definitely take the negative reviews to heart, trying to take them personally. It's easy to get offended when someone's saying something bad about you, but try to just take it as constructive criticism and realize that if one person is complaining about this issue, then probably multiple patients have experienced the same thing. So you really want to get out in front of it and address the issue and make those key changes where appropriate.
Yeah, what I'd add is Clay and I literally just finished a 1-hour presentation specifically on reputation management, and some of the statistics that are coming out are just wild. certainly for the newer generations that are used to accessing everything on their smartphone in an instant. But the value of the reviews, not only the quantity, but also the quality of them, significant. In fact, now with the younger generation, they value online reviews even more than a referral from a friend, family member, or neighbor.
And Steve,
So-
we're gonna jump, I think, on to just the last bullet in here.
And also, just one other question. I have an
Sure.
anonymous attendee, valuable insights. Can you share a website here with us now that meets the criteria? Looking for an example to motivate our owner to change. That's awesome. And
You
we're
know
gonna
what I
give you
would
that
do?
information.
So
Yeah.
I would not actually give you, say, a web. If you wanted specific websites, I'd be happy to share them. But what I would do is I would Google dentist city name, dentist Miami, Florida, dentist Dallas, Texas, and look at some of the high-ranking sites in those markets. And those are really good examples of practices doing things correctly, because you're not going to see people ranking in premium spots in markets like Dallas without having good reviews and a good website. It takes a full approach to be cohesive to achieve results in middle to upper competition markets. That's what we'll do, is like, if when we get a client in a city, we'll first look to see what the competition looks like. So just typing in dentist city name in a couple mid to large markets and looking at the top 4 or 5 sites, that should really give you a good example of practices doing things properly.
That's a great answer. And Nicole, Maria, I know that we're going to be offering some handouts for all the attendees. They can actually capture some of the content here and utilize it right away in their practice. When they receive those, feel free to respond to the email. We're happy to follow up with specific websites or any other details that you might need.
Right. So if we can get to that slide where you have your information, that'd be awesome. All right.
Yeah. So basically
Very
all those pieces of your marketing journey, set you up to win gold. Yeah, like that last picture was the gold medal relay, and everything had to be working in sync to get gold, and it's a very small margin between second or third place and the gold medal finisher. And that's the same thing with that marketing journey playbook. You really want to set yourself up for success by having all those pieces in place. So go for gold.
That's awesome. Yeah, so, okay, everyone, that concludes our second series of From the Ground Up. We hope you all enjoyed it. I want to say a huge thank you to Kyle, Clay, and Steve from Deploy Dental. Thank you for sharing valuable insights on marketing. And there was also a comment made by one of our viewers that they're walking away with more information than what they anticipated. So thank you for your comment. And we at CareStat can all agree to that. And for all of our attendees, feel free to take a screenshot of Deploy Dental's contact information. We'll be sending it out as well. Also, be on a lookout for an email. Deploy Dental is sharing valuable checklists and a playbook with our attendees. So thank you once again. And our next From the Ground Up series will be featuring Chad Hendricks. That's Wednesday, September 15th. Be on the lookout for that. It's going to be in all things insurance. So once again, we want to thank you, Deploy Dental team, Steve, Kyle, and Clay, and my guest host, Nicole, and have a great weekend, everyone.